All right, let's go on to the Kansas City Chiefs. The consensus or the composite grades have the Chiefs at 5th, and they got a B+ from PFF. This might be the one time where PFF's a little bit lower than the composite when it comes to the Chiefs and their draft. Of course, it all started with the huge storyline trading up to get Xavier Worthy. Have a theory on why people love their draft so much. Kingsley Suamataia in the second round, pick 63. The tackle out of BYU. They go tight end Jared Wiley out of TCU in round 4. And then a couple picks later in round 4, the safety Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. A couple other picks there on day 3, including the first Holy Cross draft pick in forever, long time. CJ Hansen, the guard. So, thoughts on Kansas City's draft here?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that Xavier Worthy pick in the first round, right? Number one, you get the whole dynamic of they traded with Buffalo to make that happen. Number two, Xavier Worthy, of all these wide receivers in that area, was the one that they'd identified as the guy to go get. And the fact that they went wide receiver and traded up. They were, what did I read? They were trying to go up for somebody else and then like a different position. I forget who it was. Was it Tyler Guyton? And then completely pivoted and went wide receiver.
Mims is what we just heard.
Amarius Mims.
From Eli, thank you. But Eli knows because his Bengals got Mims.
Right.
You can't have them, Chiefs.
But yeah, they were trying to trade up like a reasonable distance to go get Amarius Mims, and then the Bengals grabbed him, and then they still traded up, but this time went to get Xavier Worthy at wide receiver.
Yeah, my theory on – so Xavier Worthy, he finished 32nd on the consensus board, and the Chiefs get him at 28, of course, so it's not like a reach or anything like that. But I don't think most people had Xavier Worthy as a top 6 or 7 receiver. He just has that one unique skill of 4.21 speed. You think he's – and I'm not saying that's the only thing that he does, but that's the biggest thing that he does is have that speed. I know you think he's a better all-around receiver, but I feel like most people are loving the Chiefs draft because anytime you put a receiver on the Chiefs, it's like, well, Mahomes, this guy's going to work out great. And then you add the fact that there's speed, add the fact that they just added Marquise Brown. Mahomes, again, was 38th in passer rating throwing down the field. Say what you want about passer rating, but it's a pretty good indicator. If you take sack, you can't have a sack on a downfield pass anyway. It's a pretty good number to use when you're talking about downfield passing. Mahomes was 38th in the NFL last year. Downfield passer rating, that can completely change now with Xavier Worthy in the mix, with Marquise Brown in the mix. So I think it's the fit and the speed with Mahomes as the quarterback that people are loving right now.
Yeah, passer rating is a perfectly fair proxy to use for passing efficiency. It's not necessarily a quarterback-driven number all the time. It's the totality of the passing attack. So the point being, when he's going deep, the passer rating is not good.
Right. It's not necessarily a Mahomes stat. It's
right.
a Marquez Valdez-Scantling stat. It's a Rashee Rice.
Yeah.
It's what
it is
the
illustrating
Chiefs
that their
had.
passing game struggled passing
Right.
deep down the field, which obviously they seem to be attempting to consciously change this offseason by adding multiple speedsters at receiver, Xavier Worthy and Marquise Brown. Andy Reid, I listened to some of his press conference. He identified some of the same things that I did about Xavier Worthy, which is, he may only weigh 165 pounds, or at least weighed 165 pounds when he ran his 4.21, but he's stronger than you think, or he's at least more physically aggressive, and he doesn't play the way like late career Isaac Bruce did, right? Where he would run until there was a chance he would get hit, and then he would just drop to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Xavier Worthy attacks weak shoulders and tries to get more yardage at the end of every play. And okay, he's 165 pounds, so it's not like he's going to break many tackles, but he does fall forward through contact and get a couple of yards that maybe wouldn't have been there if he just played, like a 165 pound guy. So, I think he's obviously got speed, but he's got quickness and route running as well. He can separate underneath and laterally. Clearly, he's got a crazy second gear when the ball's in the air with that speed. Like, he can just run under it. Very difficult to overthrow him. But yeah, I think Xavier Worthy can absolutely be a first-round caliber wide receiver and make a big impact. He reminded me a little bit, a lot of the same things of Jordan Addison, where he's just kind of good at everything, except unlike Jordan Addison, he's got the one special trump card. Like, oh, and by the way, I run 4.21, which is something Addison didn't have in his bag of tricks.
I don't think he's as good of a receiver as Jordan Addison.
I don't think he's as good, but Addison was getting, like most people had Addison ranked 2 or 3 in their wide receiver rankings last year. And when you sort of read a lot of the analysis, it was like he's just not great at anything. There's no There's no special. I'm scared of the size. He's not very fast, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Addison was faster, I think, than his 40 time would lead you to believe. But the point being, like, the strength and the size thing just didn't matter, right? Addison plays bigger than that. I think Xavier Worthy plays bigger than that. And like Addison, he's good at a lot of things. But unlike Addison, he's got the one absolutely special thing of, I run a 4.2 and you don't.
So the one other thing I wanted to add here, obviously Worthy with the deep speed. I love that combo with Marquise Brown. This is, even though the Chiefs may have been trading up for a tackle, it's an interesting strategy here, right? We've talked about numerous teams over the last couple of years in the receiver/tackle market in the same draft and how they handle it, and the scarcity of tackle prospects, the plethora of receiver prospects, and how you go. So I think this ends up becoming the story, right? Knowing that they were trying to get up to get Mims, who's probably more of a top 5 tackle in this draft, they land with more of a top 10 tackle in this draft in Kingsley Suamataia from BYU. He's got a chance to come in and compete at left tackle with last year's third rounder Wanye Morris. Skill set wise, if you look at the PFF grading, I think with offensive line, it's really two distinct skill sets, right? It's how well do you pass block, how well do you run block. Suamataia has pretty distinct splits when it comes to his pass blocking and run blocking. He's been solid in pass protection. He's got good size. He's tough to get around, uses his hands pretty well. Overall, he handles power extremely well, given his size. I was surprised at how inconsistent he was from a run game perspective. And a lot of that, I think, is he's a tick late, whether he's asked to pull, whether it's on zone, pad level wise and everything. So bottom line for me is I think the Chiefs have two tackles with similar profiles stylistically, which is Juwan Taylor, and then if Suamataia is going to step in at tackle, that they both are better pass protectors than run blockers. And I know most people would say, hey, in today's NFL, that's what you would want. But the run game stuff does matter. And I do think as strong as the Chiefs are in the interior with Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, from run game perspective, they're working, I think, with two tackles who are not great as far as the run game goes. And look, the Chiefs protect them more than anyone else, the way they spread to run. And you have to account for Mahomes. They'll be protected, but it's just something to keep an eye on what they're rolling out there with at tackle that coming in this coming season.
I also wonder if the Chiefs are still in the market for offensive tackles, the veteran guys. Like, would they sign? I mean, it's one of the number of kind of vaguely capable offensive tackles that are still out there that could come in and man the position for a year.
I imagine that they would be, rather than completely relying. Like, if it was Amarius Mims, they might just say, okay, you're a first-round caliber player, go get him. Suamataia and last year's third rounder, Wanye Morris had a 55 grade last year. That was when he played. I know he held his own for a third rounder, but their offense started to struggle when he was out there. I'm not saying it was his fault, but they did coincide. So I could see them looking the veteran route like they did last year late with the Donovan Smith signing. Jared Wiley's a good athletic tight end. Some Travis Kelce insurance there. Future-proofing at the position.
Yeah, I really like Jaden Hicks as well, the safety from Washington State that they signed. He's a big-bodied safety. Like, what is he? Massive. Let me find his
I pegged every
stats.
year I'm looking for the quote-unquote
6'2", 211 was what he listed at, but he's big. Like, you watch him on the field, his tape, like he stands out as an obviously large defensive back in the backfield there. He's got length, really good ball skills. Like, he can shrink windows underneath. His movements can look a little bit stiff and mechanical, but I'm not convinced that they are necessarily. Like, he had a 6.88 3-cone. He can change direction.
Doesn't feel like that on the field.
No, but it's. I think a part of that is because he's such a big, large, freaky frame that it just looks clunky. Because you're used to seeing, it just looks awkward, right? When you're that, when you're used to seeing 6 foot, 185, 90 pound defensive backs, right? And those guys move slightly differently than guys that are significantly larger and longer, and it just looks not as clean. And I think that's what Jaden Hicks is actually working with. It looks worse than it is. And I honestly think that's part of why he fell, that, people are looking at that and going, ooh, I don't know if that changed the direction. I think that's a little bit awkward, but I actually think he can do that pretty well. Now, the counter to that is the 3-cone was amazing. The short shuttle was kind of cheeks. So, which is he? You know what I mean? Is he a guy that I think he's somebody that can actually move quite well in short areas, but if you need him to like completely reverse field, completely reverse the momentum, you get some problems.
Yeah, I know Dane Brugler loved him relative to the other safeties in this class. I
Right.
think he had him as safety 1. He is a big hitter. When he's in a robber role, I think he can make an impact in the NFL today with however much you can get away with hitting people over the middle of the field. I always look for the quote-unquote tight end eraser, though.
Yeah.
Those types in the draft, the guys with size and some physicality to maybe match up one-on-one with tight ends. And I pegged Jaden Hicks as maybe the best in this class as a tight end eraser type. So then I'm thinking forward to matchups. Where is that going to show up in the biggest games? That's Dalton Kincaid against Buffalo. That's Mark Andrews against the Ravens. I think there's a specific Jaden Hicks role that works really well for this Kansas City offense.
And it fits as well because despite his size, I think he's actually a better coverage player than he is a run defender. And
former corner, I believe. I don't want to misspeak here,
but I think somebody that you do want closer to the line of scrimmage as well. So that does kind of put him in that tight end eraser type of specialist role as a DB.
That's all that stood out to me as far as the Chiefs draft goes. Hunter Norzad, I know Trevor liked him a little bit. The center from Penn State, add some depth there. Kamal Hayden from Tennessee, the cornerback. Rounding out their day 3.
So Carson Steele is a guy that jumped out from their undrafted free agent group. The other thing that jumped out is simply the volume of their undrafted free agent group. They signed 26 undrafted free agents.
Wow, that's a massive.
That's insane.
I also, number.
if we're finished with Kansas City, I can't believe I forgot to mention this for the Broncos, but Denver has signed an undrafted free agent wide receiver out of Alabama State named B.J. West, who measures 5'8" and 142 pounds, which is roughly the equivalent of your leg. The other interesting element of B.J. West, in addition to being one of the lightest human beings you're going to find anywhere connected with football, is that in his 6-year career at Alabama State as a, remember, quote-unquote, wide receiver, he had -5 receiving yards, which didn't all come on one play because in 2 years he had negative receiving yards. That I now want nothing more from this draft class than this guy to stick on an NFL roster because evidently he's a kick returner, right, as a trade. But if you had at Alabama State an NFL caliber kick returner and you were unable to even generate positive receiving yards out of him, what were you doing?
That's like Tim Boyle having 1 touchdown and 10 picks for UConn or whatever it was. And
right.
It's like, oh, this dude's been in the NFL forever as backup.
Yeah.
People love him.
If that guy was actually an NFL caliber athlete at 142 pounds and sticks in the NFL as a kick returner and you were unable to generate positive yardage out of him, that doesn't feel like a great coaching job.
Could be a great story.